Welcome to the Inside Pitch. I'm Christopher Lockhart, the creator and administrator of this Facebook group where screenwriters, filmmakers, and creatives meet to ask and answer questions and exchange ideas and information on the craft and business of movie making. I do not moderate this group alone, so I am joined here today by the munificent Ramesh Santanam.
Hi, everyone.
And Ramesh and I, as always, we like to give a shout out to our third administrator, Steve Enlow. And thank you all for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your participation in the group. All right, so I'm very excited for our guest today. And Ramesh, as always, I like you to do the introduction. So if you would, please.
Yes, we are thrilled to introduce Ian Shorr to the Inside Pitch. Ian is a graduate of the USC Screenwriting program and has written feature films and for television. And he has had 4 scripts on the annual Blacklist in 2011, 2013, 2017, and 2019. Those 4 Spec scripts were Christo, which is being made by Warner Brothers, Fox's Capsule, Paramount's Infinite, and Orion's 1031, which is a horror film. Infinite, starring Mark Wahlberg and directed by Antoine Fuqua, comes out in May 2021, which is next year. His other produced credits include Magnet Splinter, Sony Crackle's Office Uprising, as well as episodes of Training Day on CBS and Deputy on Fox. He's currently writing The Juliet for Warner Brothers, Ark Survival for Stampede, and Dance Dance Revolution for Lionsgate. Ian, welcome to the Inside Pitch.
Guys, thank you so much for having me.
So what aren't you doing? That's the question.
Sleeping.
Clearly. So let's start, if we can. Let's just talk a little bit about Infinite, which hasn't been released yet. And it sounds like it's a pretty hefty credit. Mark Wahlberg, Antoine Fuqua. How did all that come about?
So that was a long process. Basically, back in 2011, my agent sent me this book called The Reincarnationist Papers, and it was a self-published novel that was found by a producer named Rafi Crone when he was in Kathmandu. He was staying in this little tea house, and he found a book on a shelf that he thought had an interesting cover. Opens up the book, and he sees there's a bounty on the second page that says, whoever finds this book and helps me get it turned into a movie or sold to a big publisher, I will give you X reward. So Rafi's like, well, that's a bold statement. So he starts reading this thing, and he realizes there's totally a movie in this book. The book is same premise as the movie. It's about a secret society of people that can reincarnate upon death and retain all their past memories and skill sets from their previous lives. So Rafi comes back to America. He tracks down the author, this guy Eric Mykrantz, who wrote the book while working at Oracle in Denver, and set up a deal with him, partnered up with Imagine, and they started sending the book out to writers. So I read this thing and I instantly fall in love with it. I can see exactly what kind of movie this can be. It just hits all the pleasure centers in my brain. It reminds me of like the same feeling I had when I saw the first Matrix. So I go in and I pitch my heart out to Imagine, and it turns out that they don't want the Matrix version. They wanted like the Harry Potter version, and I didn't know how to do that. So I was like, well, go with God. And they never found a writer for it, but the executive who found the book, Rafi, he remembered liking my pitch. So a year or two later, I think around 2013, he got back in touch, and he asked me if I still wanted to adapt it. He didn't have, it'd be like a spec deal, but I was so in love with that thing that it was like the one that got away came back. So we had my manager put an option on the book, and he's like, "Hey, how long do you think it'll take you to adapt this?" And I'm like, I think I need probably a year. It's a complicated book. It's a lot of world building, but I think I can do it in a year. So jump ahead to 3 years later. I'm still not done. And my manager is starting to panic. He's like, dude, we're going to lose the option. You need to finish this thing. So finally, in late 2016, get the draft done. We take it out in 2017, and Paramount comes in early, really aggressively, going after it with Lorenzo di Bonaventura producing. They buy it. I start doing notes for those guys. Only problem is the script was bought by an interim president of Paramount who left the company 2 weeks after buying it. So the new guy who came in to take over the job looked at the old slate and just started crossing off projects that he didn't want to do. And Infinite was one of those projects. So I didn't even realize it, but the movie died. And it only came back to life because Antoine Fuqua came into Paramount because they were trying to get him to do G.I. Joe. But Lorenzo, being the crafty guy that he is, slipped him Infinite instead. And Lorenzo came back. So Antoine came back saying, "Okay, I don't want to do G.I. Joe, but Infinite is my next movie." And Paramount's like, "Great, we love that script. Let's dig it out of wherever we put it." So at that point, once Antoine came on, it was just doing his notes and getting it out to cast, getting the right package put together for it. And there's a million ways it could have gone wrong or could have fallen apart because it's a wildly expensive movie that's based on a self-published novel. It's not based on a toy, a video game, a comic book, and any piece of recognizable IP. And so it's a huge risk for a studio to spend that big on something that no one's ever heard of. So I count myself extremely lucky that we made it through that gauntlet. We finished shooting back in December, and we were supposed to come out on August 9th of this year, but I don't know if you guys have heard, we had this weird pandemic thing happen. Anyway, so we got pushed to...
You haven't heard.
Yeah. We got pushed to Memorial Day weekend of next year.
So you mean you didn't just roll out of bed and sell a script?
They say you need to write like they say you need to write like 5 bad scripts before you write a good one. I wrote probably 12 bad scripts before I wrote a halfway decent one. I started when I was really young, and basically would write like 1 spec per year starting in about 8th grade. And so I got all my really embarrassing ones out of the way early. So like wrote about 12 bad ones and started writing ones that people could read all in one sitting. And then by about script number 15, I had something that a studio wanted to buy.
Wow. So how long have you been writing?
Let's see here. My first time writing like a screenplay short was in 7th grade. I grew up in Park City, Utah, and I was going to Sundance every year when I was a kid. So my middle school had a Sundance screenwriting contest where you wrote the first 5 pages of a movie, and they had some interns from Sundance be the judges on this, and whoever won got a bunch of passes to the festival. So that first year that I entered something, I wound up winning, and I never won anything before. I never like scored a basket or a goal or anything. So this was like, I was like, oh shit, that's what that feels like. I like this. I'm gonna keep doing this. So the next year I wrote a full feature, and then another one the year after that. Eventually got confident enough that I knew I wanted to major in it in college, and sold my first studio script about a month after I graduated.
So that would be when?
That would be 2007.
7. All right. So you've been in it a while now.
Yeah, you can say that.
And when you say you graduated, you mean from USC?
Yeah, from USC. Yeah, I went there for the undergrad screenwriting program, and I actually I met a professor there who later became my writing partner. That script you brought up, 1031, was co-written with this guy Peter Gamble, who was my freshman year writing professor there. So yeah, that 4 years definitely taught me a lot.
Must have been a boost of confidence when your screenwriting professor wants to write a script with you.
I mean, it was it definitely was, like a long organic process, because he probably taught me more about writing that first year than any mentor I've ever had my entire life. And we stayed friends in the years after that, while I was still in school, and I would call him up for notes when I would get stuck on projects. And eventually there was one project where he gave me so many good notes that half the good ideas in it were his. I was just like, do you want to just co-write this with me? And all these years later, we're still writing together. Wow.
So let's sort of break this down a little bit. Let's start at the beginning. I want to know how you went from from graduating from school to a year later selling a script. What happened in between? How did you get a rep? Did you have a rep? Kind of walk us through that so the audience understands how this worked for you.
So the way that this worked for me was, when I was in college, I was still doing the thing where I was writing a new spec every year, and a couple of those actually got produced independently in college. Like Splinter was something I wrote my sophomore year, and we were in production on that by my senior year. And I wrote another like boxing movie my freshman year that got produced for super cheap independently. And so I thought that because I was getting movies made, that I was going to be able to, easily find an agent or a manager or get more work. But the truth that I discovered is that unless you're writing movies that turn out really, really well despite their low budget, or make a lot of money, or that attract really high-level talent, those independent flicks don't do a lot for you career-wise. I thought that getting a couple things produced was going to be the thing that launched me, but it wasn't. It made me a little bit of money and it taught me a lot, but it wasn't my coming out party. That didn't really happen until I'd say senior year of college. I was writing this script that had a really fun concept that I knew in the back of my head that this is going to be something that people wanted to see. It was this, the way that I described it was it's Ferris Bueller's Day Off set in the world of Grand Theft Auto. It was about a bunch of teenagers with diplomatic immunity who can't get arrested for anything. So I knew I had something commercial. I knew I had something where I could see the poster, I could see the trailer. It felt like a studio movie. And I had a professor that year who just, worked me like a racehorse on that thing for 2 straight semesters until it really felt like a polished piece of work. So the kind of game changer was they did a pitch test for all the graduating screenwriters right around graduation time. And they let us loose in the ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel, basically just doing speed pitching, going from table to table, talking to managers, agents, producers, executives. And we had 5 minutes at each table to pitch our thesis script and do like a Q&A session for it. And the school taught us completely the wrong way to do these fast pitches. They were like, okay, you need to tell them the title, the logline, the genre, first act, you're like inciting incident, second act break, the broad beats of the second act, the climax, the resolution, and then leave 2 minutes for questions. So like it was just like we were going from table to table, just giving these poor people just information enemas. And I realized, like, after a couple of tries at that, I'm like, okay, this isn't working for me. I need to try something different. So I sat down across from this manager from Benderspink, and I said, okay, I don't want to give you the full movie. I just want to tell you what the opening scene is, and if you like it, then we'll talk. So I just pitched her out the first 3 pages of the script, what happens, how we set up the world of the movie and what the tone is. Like, you know, I just gave this very energetic, almost movie trailer-ish pitch, something very visual. And she sat up and, you know, got on board very quickly and asked for the script that night. She showed it to her bosses the next day. They signed me as a client a couple days after that, did about a month's worth of their notes on the script. We took it out, and it got sold about 6 weeks after graduation. So like at that point, that was when I got my first agent off of that sale. I signed with CAA. I started going to a million meetings, meeting the whole town and figuring out my next project. And I was totally convinced that, like, okay, now this is where it begins. And that was right when the WGA went on strike. So there were definitely some false starts involved here, but the real launch of it was when I had a script that people would read and start thinking selfishly, like, okay, I could benefit from being involved with this person or this project.
Would it be fair to say that USC was a bridge for you into the industry? Clearly, you had to do all the work, but do you feel like that opportunity really arose because of your involvement in school?
I think that for me, USC was absolutely worth the money that I spent on it. And I think that if you treat film school like a trade school, like you're going there and you have a ticking clock that tells you how long you have before it's graduation, and you have to either start doing your career or go get a real job. I think that the things that I learned at USC were really what allowed me to write a script that people wanted to buy. It wasn't necessarily my connections at the school that did anything, because I didn't really make that many. But I think that just on a learning level, being there was what gave me the skills that I needed.
So what would your advice be to people who aren't in film school? Clearly, there are a lot of people who are taking up screenwriting when they're 30 or 40, and they have no intention of going to film school at that point.
Oh yeah, well, one, nobody needs film school. Like, it can certainly be helpful. It can, it can teach you a lot. It's valuable, but it's not a necessity. Like, nobody checks to see where you went to film school when you're going out for a job in this town. Like, nobody cares about your grades. Nobody cares about your GPA, whether or not you graduated with distinction or whatever, or even if you got a diploma. The only thing they care about is, like, can you tell a story, and am I going to make some money off of this?
I think.
Sorry, guys.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think really one of the few times it can really matter is if the executive that you're going to meet with is a graduate from the same program.
Oh yeah, that's right? Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's absolutely helpful. I had always heard about, like, the USC Mafia, and, like, there was, like, that crew of writers, directors, producers that came out of SC who all look out for each other and help each other get jobs. And if that is out there, I would love to meet them, because that sounds very helpful. In my experience, the Mafia turned out to be kind of a myth. But it does help to have that shared experience with an executive or a producer. But even without film school, you can still find other ways to have those shared experiences. And like, in terms of what you can do if you want to learn the skills that you get in film school without going to film school, there's no better time than now to do that, because you've got all these online resources. You have things like this show that we're doing right now, a masterclass. There's a million books out there. There's a million online classes. There's an entire online database of screenplays that you can read and learn from. There's nothing stopping you from going and watching your favorite movie right now and breaking it down act by act to see how the writer put it together. There's Reddit communities where people will read each other's stuff and offer feedback. Most likely everybody's got at least one creative friend that they can show their material to. So all of the resources that you get in film school are available. You just have to be craftier about how you find them and put them together.
And social media can also help to bridge some of those relationships. So, for example, you're on Twitter, I've been told, yes?
Yeah.
So any of our members can follow you on Twitter. And,
sure.
It is a way to get to know people in the business. And the industry is a very different place today for writers trying to break in than it was 25 years ago. I'm not saying it's easier, but there are a lot of tools and a lot more resources out there that just weren't available. In the old days, you'd have to slog out to a Robert McKee.
Oh yeah. Like if I would have killed to have access to the type of people that you can find on Twitter right now back when I was first starting out. Like, for anybody that doesn't follow my manager, John Zazirny, he's a fantastic resource for this stuff. He does threads a couple times a week where he goes into deep detail about different aspects of the business. And that's information that I was, trying to get out of, screenwriting magazines back in the early 2000s. There's a huge gold mine of information that you can find on social media that makes you better equipped to break in.
Yeah, because so much of this stuff, and I'm not slamming magazines and all that, but it's always the same thing. Don't write what you can't film, and don't use we see, and sort of all of this mechanical stuff, where somebody like your manager can really provide some in-depth information about how this business works and how writers can tackle these issues.
It used to be that if somebody was out there giving advice or providing some kind of intel about how the industry works, it usually meant that they were already out of the industry. It usually meant that they might have had a career, but it was over at this point, and now they're on the speaking circuit. Whereas now you get people with their boots on the ground who are doing this day in, day out, who are able to provide information in real time to you.
That's a great point. Mr. Ramesh?
Can we talk a little bit about, you mentioned 1031 earlier.
Yeah.
And how did that come about? Because I noticed there are other credits on it: screen story, a story by, and then you co-wrote it with Peter Gamble, was it? And just sort of how that came about, and also how did you work in collaboration with him? What was that like, working with someone else to write this thing?
So I'm glad you're asking this, because this actually ties into something else we were talking about a second ago. When I was talking about how I got my career launched through that pitch fest at USC, different companies will do pitch fests throughout the year, and some of them, they'll send an intern or somebody low on the totem pole at the company to go hear these things, because you hear probably 9 times out of 10 pitches that are so conceptually flawed that it's impossible to get a good script out of them. Like the pitch fests tend to be seen as sort of like the island of broken toys of the world where people are trying to break in. But 1031 came out of a pitch fest. This writer named Laurie Ashburn, she wrote a version of the story that we used as our launch pad. Basically, she pitched somebody from my manager's company the basic concept about a girl on Halloween who finds a note inside a candy bag that says, "Help, I've been kidnapped." And it's about her investigating her neighborhood, trying to figure out what's happening. So like it had such a strong concept that that the management company Bellevue immediately responded to it. They felt like in terms of her actual screenplay, they wanted to go a different direction, just because she wrote it with very young characters. Like she was writing from the point of view of young children. They wanted to do an R-rated movie with an adult main character that they could cast a legit actress in. So Bellevue options for script. They were originally developing it with a writer named Kathy Charles, who's a really talented horror writer, and eventually they decided that they wanted to go a specific tonal direction with it, where they wanted something that was going to be fun and poppy and popcorny while being still scary. And that's very much my brand and the brand that I write with Peter Gamble. So they bring me and Peter the concept, and we haven't read any of the other writers' drafts. All we know is the basic log line. And so Peter and I sit down and crank out an outline about here's how the movie's going to happen over the course of 3 acts in our heads. Turn that outline into the spec script, just using the process that Peter and I usually use is he lives over in Glendale. I'm over in Los Feliz. We join up on a writer duet, working remotely since we both got kids, and it's it's hard to make the in-person stuff work. So we'll bounce scenes back and forth over the course of a couple of months. I'll write a scene, send it off to him. He'll put his hands on it and do his thing. We'll polish it until we've got something we're both happy with, and then just repeat that process for the rest of the script. So yeah, did that over the course of a few months until we were happy with the end result. And then my manager took it out to buyers, and Orion came in and bought it.
Can I ask a follow-up on that?
Yeah, of course.
And it is because Chris mentioned earlier about the VCs and all that stuff. And
yeah,
I've read your work. I've read your scripts. And one thing I noticed is they are incredibly entertaining reads.
Thank you.
1031, Infinite, and if you can talk a little bit about your writing style and how you sort of approach something like that, because you have they say new writers are told don't put in stuff that can't be filmed and don't do asides and all this stuff, but in 1031 you have and the Burns, they're about to become famous, and then in a better world this would be the this would be a happy
story
ending.
Would end here. Yeah,
right, the story would end here. And even in Infinite you have the little nod to Philip K. Dick in the description and the androids quote. And you also you use Springsteen lyrics to describe a character. So if you can talk, and then there's like bold and italics and ellipses, and it's sort of you're constantly reading. It's constant. The pages are moving. So if you can sort of talk about that.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because I write in a really specific style, and I get this question of is it smart to approach something stylistically from a place where you break so many rules? And the truth is that I think that a lot of the old rules about style are falling by the wayside, because what more and more writers are realizing is that a script, before it's even a blueprint for a movie, is a sales document. It's you providing the reader with an emotional experience. And considering how hard the job of a reader is, having to take home 10 scripts and read them over the course of a weekend, it behooves you as a writer to do everything in your power to never bore that person. So if that means making your style more conversational, if it means adding in bolds, underlines, ellipses, italics, onomatopoeia, whatever tricks that you feel like are going to help the read, then that's all fair game. For me, like the quote that I always remember is Scott Rosenberg said that William Goldman showed that screenplays could be fun to read, and Shane Black showed that they could be fun to write. And that definitely resonates with me, because those are two of my biggest influences on my style. In fact, I can pinpoint the moment when I realized that your job as a writer is partially to make the script fun to read. I remember I was reading the script for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid when I was maybe 13. And there's that great part where Paul Newman is about to have the knife fight with that guy. And instead of fighting him, he just kicks him in the nuts. So the way it looks on the page is it says, Butch delivers the most aesthetically pleasing kick to the balls in cinema history. The other guy makes an absolutely indescribable noise and sinks to his knees. So like as soon as I read that, I was like, okay, I know that, like, I've been told you shouldn't write things that you can film and that you can't film, and you shouldn't be trying to throw in meta jokes into the text. But I know exactly what the most aesthetically pleasing kick to the balls in cinema history looks and sounds like. There's no more effective way to put that. And once I realized that the only real rule was just to do whatever it takes to help the read, then my whole world got blown wide open. I realized that, yeah, you can basically do whatever you want as long as it's helping people turn pages.
Go ahead, Ramesh. You're doing such a good job.
No, because I was actually up till 3 reading 1031. It was such a good read.
Thank you.
You talked about getting about notes. If you can talk about notes, and how do you deal with notes from say your manager, and then dealing with notes from the studios and the producers, and how different are they? And
yeah, that's a great question. So for my own process, I tend to be extremely collaborative. Like I'm jealous of people who can, lock themselves in a room for a couple months, crank out a script all by themselves, and then hand it in for feedback. The truth that I've found for myself is that I work best when it's an ongoing collaboration with a lot of feedback. Like, so what my process is, when I have an idea for a movie, I'll outline the shit out of it. I'll write like a 20-page outline. I'll do multiple drafts of that outline. Then I'm handing into my manager and getting his feedback on, get that outline as good as it can be, and then make that the jumping off point for the script. Once I go to script, I'll write 30 pages, turn those into the manager or whoever I'm working most closely on the project with. It might be a producer or a director, but usually my manager. Get notes on those first 30, workshop those, make sure that they're rock solid, then write the next 30 and repeat that same process. So the advantage of that is it makes my first drafts read like third drafts. It means I don't get lost in the woods on the way, because if there's a problem in the first act, it's usually going to manifest itself as a much bigger problem in the third act. It's my way of catching those problems early. That process is super collaborative. It's super intimate. It's us calling each other 10 o'clock on a Friday and saying, okay, I think I just cracked that thing that we were stuck on. It's a partnership. And even if he has an idea that I don't necessarily agree with, what I'll do is I'll say okay, maybe it's not A, but what if it's B? He's like, what if it's not B, but it's C? So we'll throw ideas back and forth until we land on the right thing. So when you're getting notes from the studio, it's definitely a different process than that, because most of the time when I get notes from my manager, it's either on the phone or in person, and it's a conversation. With the studio, they send you an email with a document, and it's a list of things that you need to do. So it's definitely a different experience there. And the big thing that I've learned is that process of bouncing ideas back and forth until you find the right thing is immensely valuable for dealing with studio notes as well, because a lot of times when they have a problem with something, they'll pitch you a solution that is definitely not the right thing. So your job is to look for the note behind the note, or find the good note hidden within the bad note, and execute that. Because at the end of the day, the one thing you're not allowed to do is to tell them no. You can come back and say okay, I tried that and I'm running into these issues, but I do have this idea about how we can accomplish the thing that you want. So and that was just a process that I learned by doing notes with my manager.
What's your opinion on Loglines? Do you use them?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you start to think about less and less as you start to write for a living. Creating a really good logline is pretty fucking important when you're first starting out, because it shows that you know how to write, that you know how to distill a story down into a sentence or two and make it exciting and palatable and make people want to know more. Part of the process of becoming a writer is learning how to describe your story in the most commercial terms possible, and that's what a logline is. But the truth is, as you start to write for a living and start to get more jobs, I don't even really think about the log line until the script is complete. Like when I have to give it to the agents, or the agents are going to send it out to the town to buyers. That's when I start thinking about okay, how do we describe this movie in one sentence? And it's it's a lot it's a lot easier than it looks. Like a well-written log line looks effortless, and it definitely it's something that takes some practice.
And it's interesting that you talk about how, as you evolve as a professional writer, perhaps expectations of you change. So you use the example of a log line. Yes, as you're trying to break in, you might need to use a log line as a calling card. Once you've already broken in, people are inviting you into pitch, so tell me about your being asked specifically to pitch for Infinite, where you were brought in to pitch an idea based on an existing book. How did you get that call? How does that work? Because you're obviously not using log lines. How do you get in that room?
Oh, so the way that worked was around that time, I just sold a big sci-fi spec. I'd done like a sci-fi version of the Count of Monte Cristo that we sold to Warner Brothers the previous year, and was still getting a lot of good meetings off of that, and so what that meant was that my name was on a lot of lists as being a sci-fi guy. Like if a piece of IP pops up that fits into a certain box, they'll bring up a list of writers who they think might be right for it. Because of Christo, like people were thinking of me when they were looking for, not terribly expensive, fast young writers who can write big budget sci-fi. So my agents got a copy of the book sent to them by the producers and the studio that they had partnered with, saying, "Hey, we're looking for a writer to adapt this. We think Ian Shorr would be good for it." So my agent sent me the book. I just responded like immediately to this thing, and then had to figure out how to describe my vision for the movie in 4 to 5 pages. It was with Infinite, the log line was basically already done for me because it was just the log line of the book. But because the story that I was telling was going to be pretty markedly different from the events of the book, it was just about figuring out how to tell that in less than 15 minutes.
Ramesh? I'm sorry, it just looked like you wanted to say something. I didn't want to.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Can we talk a little bit about the Blacklist? And Ramesh said that you've been on it 4 times. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's partially just because, like, one of the years my script was called "Dear Blacklist Voter, I Have Your Family," and shockingly, like they put me way up on that one. That was a good year. I mean, here's the thing.
Are you being serious?
I've been on that list 4 times, but the reason why you don't see the same names on there over and over again most of the time is because generally when somebody writes a kick-ass spec script that gets on the Blacklist, the next step for them is to not write more specs. The next step for them is to get staffed on a TV show or to go sell something to a streamer or to essentially go work in TV. And while I love TV, my heart's always been in movies. So rather than go down the TV path, it just worked out that I would write a spec, sell it, it would get on the Blacklist, and then I would do the same thing again a couple years later, just because I was more interested in movies than TV, and because when I'm really passionate about an idea, I don't care whether or not I'm getting paid to write it. Like if I have something that I think is good enough, I'll just sit down and crank it out.
So there's a few things that I want to ask you, and I'm going to probably forget them all. But
Okay.
I want to get back to the Blacklist in a moment, because I also want to make sure that we differentiate between the annual Blacklist and the paid service Blacklist.
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes those lines are blurred for new writers. But I'm going to table that for a second. I want to talk about branding. And are you branded as a sci-fi writer? Is that how you see yourself? And then my second question would be in regards to specs versus assignments. Since yes, sort of the true bread and butter of most screenwriters is assignments, but you often have to get those assignments by writing a spec. So can you just talk about both of those issues? Branding for a writer, is it important for a new writer to brand themselves, and the difference between spec writing and writing on assignments?
Yeah, those are both fantastic questions. I'm glad you brought up the branding thing in particular, because I've seen so many young writers be resistant to that idea because they want to show the town that they won't be pigeonholed, that they can, they can write multiple genres, that they can, that they can do anything. And that's an amazing ambition to have. But the truth is, most people are lucky if they can write one genre well. And the way that branding works in your favor is when you are first breaking in and you've got like your calling card spec, that spec better be written in a genre that you genuinely love, because if it sells, that means that you're going to spend the next 3 to 5 years continuing to write in that genre. When a script sells, or when a writer's getting some heat, like I was saying before, that writer's name starts to go on some lists. So if you break in with an R-rated comedy, that means that, for the next few years, your name is going to be popping up on R-rated comedy lists whenever a studio is looking to hire a writer. So if you know yourself what your strengths are, and you know what you love as a creator, and what is the most authentic expression of who you are, then that's your brand. And you knowing that means that the studios are going to know which list to put you on. And you have to remember that the studios only buy what they understand. Like I knew a writer who, when he was going out on his first set of meetings, the studios would ask him, like, so what kind of stuff do you like to write? What are you good at? What's your specialty? And he would say, I'm really great with structure. And that was the wrong answer, because there's no list for structure. Like, there's list for comedy, there's list for horror, for sci-fi, for action, for biopics, for 1 hour dramas, that all of that stuff. But there's no list for a specific skill set like that. So if you go in there and you say, like, okay, I really love writing like high school comedy, or I really love writing edgy historical biopics, then that's music to their ears, because they know what to put you up for. They know what jobs to think of and pair you up with. So for me, I broke in with that hard R action movie starring teenagers, and unfortunately around that time, the studios stopped making movies starring teenagers. Like, the streamers weren't around yet, and because there were no teenage movie stars, they didn't want to take the gamble on buying scripts like that. So I had the bad luck of breaking in with a genre, with a brand that was dying. So after writing and selling a couple of those like teenage thriller scripts that never got made, I realized I was going to have to pivot to something else if I wanted to make some money. So I started branching out into writing big budget action and sci-fi and horror. And it was done in the same tonal style as those teenage thrillers I've been writing before. Like, there was a palpable sense of fun, and there was always a really fast pace. There was always a sense of wish fulfillment. There were certain elements that would hold over from my old genre that were just part of my brand, that I would put into these new genres that I was writing in. And I've been lucky that I've written stuff in the sci-fi world, in the action world, in the horror world that's sold or gotten made, and that means that all of that is in my brand wheelhouse. So I feel blessed that I can write in a few different genres and be accepted by the studios in those, because there are people who are they get stuck being only the horror guy, or only the comedy guy, or only the action guy, and they might have ambitions to write stuff beyond that. And then that's a whole process of convincing the studios that you can do more than one genre. So that's that's basically everything I have to say about branding, and I've totally forgotten your second question. What was the second question?
It was about specs versus assignments. So can you just fill in our viewers a little bit about what spec writing is and what assignment writing is, and what you're doing? Are you doing both? You balance? Is there one more, one less?
Oh yeah. So with specs, it's stands for speculative. It's you speculating that if you write a script for free, somebody's going to come along and buy it. It's you being your own boss and creating the script on your own power. An assignment is where a movie studio or producer has an idea of their own, or they might have a piece of intellectual property that they want to adapt, or they have a script that already exists that they need rewritten. All of those fall into the category of assignments. And the assignments are typically what you start getting once you've sold a spec, once you've shown the studios that you've got a voice that people are going to respond to. Then you start getting put up for jobs where you fix existing scripts, or where you adapt existing books or comics, toys, video games, whatever. Now, when you're first starting out, and you get like your first assignment meetings, a lot of times what happens is you're going on what are known as cattle calls, or you're going into bake-offs, which is, or yeah, beauty pageants. I've heard that one too. Now, what that means is a studio has a project. They don't know exactly what they want done to it. So what they do is they will put out a call for an open writing assignment to all the agencies, and they'll bring in like 30 writers from all over town and hear a massive onslaught of pitches from all these young, hungry up-and-comers who are all competing for the same job. And it's extremely competitive. It's extremely hard to get the job in the first place. You've got to pitch your way up multiple levels of people in order to secure the job. And a lot of times that you do all this work on it, you might get picked for a year, and then the movie will fall apart, or they'll fire you and bring in another writer. I guess this is a long way of saying that while you can definitely make some money, you can help your reputation with assignments, it's very hard to genuinely advance your career with just the assignment game when you're first starting out. I've found that I've written probably 13 specs since my career started, and I've sold 9 of them, and I've probably chased 70 assignments and landed about 13 of them. So like my batting average when it comes to assignments is abysmal, whereas my average when it comes to specs is pretty good. So it's just a matter of being willing to take the risk on your own material versus chasing something that they already know that they want.
Yeah, it's amazing that there's so much work behind the writing.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's
like, yeah. You go ahead, please.
Oh, I mean, it's one of the things that they don't tell you when you're first starting out is that when you go on these cattle calls, a lot of times what the studios will do is that they'll hear ideas from 30 different writers, and they'll start to kind of cherry pick ideas that they like for the project, and you won't get the job, but all of a sudden, if the movie comes out, you might see one of your ideas in there. It's a process it can be pretty demoralizing. Like my first year, I probably pitched on 10 projects in 10 months. Didn't get any of them. None of them ever actually wound up getting made with anybody. And a lot of times they were what's known as zombie projects, where you've got a script that is all but dead, or a project that is all but dead. It's been around for years. It's had multiple writers working on it. It's some executive's favorite thing. So they're, they're throwing a little bit of money at it, trying to find it, some miracle worker writer to resurrect this thing. But you are chasing after something that the studio is not considering a very big priority. So you might, work your ass off and pitch your heart out. And even if, against the odds you get the job, you're still working on something that has all these strikes against it.
Yeah. It's really hard work. And it's a little bit like being an actor, isn't it? Where you're sort of, you're being dragged out, and the cherry picking thing can be a little demoralizing. I know a lot of writers who've been very, very hurt or angered by that process.
Yeah. It's I mean, like when you first break in, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is assuming that things are going to get markedly easier after this. Like you're going to be facing just different types of challenges, and one of those is having to claw your way to the top of the 30 people who are competing for the same assignment. So, I mean, that's honestly, like, these days I only go after an assignment if it's something that I really, really love, where I'll feel like I've missed out if I don't at least chase it. And I only chase after assignments where I can picture the first, where I can picture the three acts of the movie in my head just based on the concept. Like if I hear something where I know what the first act is, but everything else is murky, then most of the time, I might spend a day or two working on it, but if it doesn't come to me, then I just let that one go. Like if I get a concept or a project handed to me where I can instantly envision the trailer for this movie, I can instantly envision, the shape of the three acts of this thing, that's how I know it's going to be worth the time I put into it to chase down the assignment. Because if I'm writing really fast, I can sometimes write a spec in the amount of time that it takes me to actually go out and land an assignment by the time I'm done pitching my way up the ladder.
Wow. All right, so let's backpedal to the Blacklist for a moment.
Yeah.
All right, so I just want to make sure that first and foremost, that when we talk about the Blacklist in this context, we're talking about the annual list where scripts are chosen by executives around town as their favorites. And the scripts that get the most favorites end up at the top of the list, and then it goes down. But this is a list that is compiled by executives around town. The Blacklist paid service is an offshoot of the list, but it's different in the sense that it is it's kind of like a perpetual contest almost, where writers have to pay for reviews and you're ranked and so on. But it's much more of a closed world where people have to come into that world to see where a writer is ranked, as opposed to the annual Blacklist where it's just blasted out all over the world. And of course, it's the brainchild of Franklin Leonard, and it's the best list to be on. And of course, it's called the Blacklist because it's a spoof or a satire of the communist witch hunts in the 50s, where writers found themselves on the Blacklist, and it was the worst list to be on.
Right.
So to have your script on that list is actually I think a very strong compliment, because it means that that script had enough fans amongst the executive branch of the business.
Yes, I'm so sorry, but you can probably hear this. My gardeners just showed up. I'm gonna we hit pause on this. I'll go inside.
Yes.
All right.
There you go. You go ahead. I was worried about my garden. So, and look at this. This, something, we're not even going to cut away. This is exciting.
All right.
This is the behind the scenes making of.
Yeah, well,
listen, by the way, it's so nice out there. I thought at first it was a green screen. It's so nice out. I thought it was fake until I saw the leaves just moving slightly. So, well, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so, yeah, so it's really a great compliment to get on that blacklist. It's a little bit political in some ways. I think that, you probably need a really strong rep around town, meaning like you're at CAA or WME or ICM, not always, or you have a very strong manager who's able to get that script out, because that's really what it means. It means that people all around town read your script enough that it lands on the list.
Yeah.
So does it have any impact on you? So after your script appears on that annual list, are all of a sudden you getting calls, interest? Do people want to meet with you?
Oh yeah, yeah. Getting on the blacklist is it can be a huge game changer for anybody who's first breaking in. It's a way to essentially announce yourself to the town. A lot of scripts that wind up on there haven't they weren't sold or set up when they were put on that list, and then they found a buyer afterwards. So what I found in my experience is that if your script gets on the list, it means that you have about 6 to 12 months of a little boost for yourself, like where people are more interested in meeting with you. They're more interested in what you have next, where you're being put up for better jobs. It's the shelf life doesn't extend much beyond that. Like you've got about that amount of time to do something else that's interesting. But for those first 6 to 12 months, you've got a chance to really capitalize on it.
Do you have an opinion on screenwriting contests?
Yeah, I know that there's a couple of legit ones. I know that that Austin Film Fest is one that people pay attention to. I seem to think that who else? I mean, obviously Nichols, maybe Screencraft. Outside of those, I don't know enough about them to really talk about it. But I can say that the more obscure the contest is, the less that it means. And the further down the list that you are in that contest, the less that it means. Like if you send out a query letter and you say, I was a quarterfinalist in the Long Beach screenwriting competition, and that's not really going to move the needle for the person who's receiving that query letter. If you say like, okay, I made it to the the semifinals of the Nichols, that's something else. The truth is for me, like, I think when I was trying to break in, I made it to like the semifinals of Austin one year. Never made it into Nichols, never made it into like the Sundance screenwriting competition.
Except when you were in elementary school.
Except the one in 7th grade, exactly. Yeah, I absolutely just humiliated all the other 7th graders with my amazing script.
Good for you.
But the truth is, like, I have seen like contests be game changers for people, but it's an extremely narrow target that you're trying to hit, because there's only really 3 that mean something, and they only mean something if you score really high.
And clearly you were able to break in without the help of contests.
Yeah, I like it's the I mean the script that placed pretty high in Austin. That one wound up being the first movie of mine that got produced. It was this like extremely cheap independent film that a fellow student at USC went back to his hometown and shot it himself, and that didn't really wind up taking either of us anywhere. But I'd hoped that from the contest I might get a manager, get an agent, something. The truth is, it got me a weekend in Austin. I had a great time. I got to meet some awesome writers, but that was about the extent of the benefits of it. Like the only thing that really changed the game for me was writing a script that felt completely undeniable, and then pitching it to the right person.
Which is a lot like the way the real Hollywood game is played.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I've seen a lot of young writers do is that they there's this obsession with getting your rep, getting your manager, getting your agent, with having these sort of signifiers of success, or signifiers that you're ready, and all that stuff it'll find its way to you if you've got something that inspires people to think selfishly. If you've got something that, like, if you got a script where somebody reads it and they're like, okay, there is money to be made here. If I don't do this, some other schmuck's going to do it, and we need to capitalize on this. Like, if you have something that inspires people to start doing that, then the manager, the agent, the reputation, that all comes fairly easily.
Yeah, ultimately, it's all about the writing.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I wish I'd spent more time being less obsessed with finding a rep, and more time really honing my craft when I was younger, because I might have found someone earlier in my career, but
like in the 8th grade.
Like in the 8th grade, exactly. Yeah, I would have.
You would have been at CAA when you were in the 8th grade. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You talked about the number of specs you write, and I take it you're still writing specs. When you're thinking of writing a spec, how important is concept? Do you think high concept when you sit down to think, okay, I want to write about this?
I think it depends. I think it depends if you are viewing this as a feature or a spec pilot. If you're viewing this as a studio play or a financier movie or something you're going to make yourself, because all those have different parameters. Like, if you are going after a studio, like you've got something that you think is right for one of the big 4 or 5. Then having a high concept is absolutely necessary, because that's basically all the studios do now. If you're trying to write a spec that a studio is going to buy, you're going after an extremely narrow target, because 1, they're buying fewer specs than they ever have before, and 2, they're buying fewer types of them. Like back in the 90s, you could write a family drama, like a courtroom movie, a chase thriller, like a high school sex comedy. You have all these genres that the studios just aren't making anymore, and definitely aren't buying specs of. Like, so if you have something that fits into the boxes that studios are looking for, and has that type of concept that they get excited about just based on hearing the idea all by itself, then yeah, that means you've got a studio spec. If you've got something that is a little weirder, a little more niche, more character driven, like something that would score high on the Blacklist, then you've got most likely a financier movie. You've got an independent film. And that's also totally legit. There's plenty of places out there that are making those movies, and you've got a broader target to hit when you've got a movie that can be made for $10 million versus a movie that you need $100 million to make. Knowing what kind of project you have is the first step towards saying, like, okay, like, is this a financier play? Is this a studio play? And or is this a TV show?
How about the streamers? Because they seem to now be much more open to the sort of stuff that writers want to write, but that studios may not be interested. They just dropped $20 million on Mark Wahlberg movie. They dropped $30 million on a Sam Levinson 2-person movie. So they seem to be a little more open. There aren't as many, I guess, who are going to spend that kind of money, but they are a potential platform. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. So what's great about the streamers is that they're playing both the same game that the big studios are, but also doing all the things that the studios haven't done in 20 years. They're the whole goal of places like Netflix is to be everything to everyone. So like at Netflix, you've got them spending gigantic amounts of money on crazy big budget stuff like they're making Red Notice with The Rock right now, and they did 6 Underground with Ryan Reynolds and Michael Bay, and on the other end of the spectrum, they're doing little two-hander movies and LGBTQ stories and high school flicks, like genres that the studios haven't touched in a while have a really healthy home over there. So if you have something that feels like it could have been made 20 years ago by a studio but wouldn't be made now, then chances are it's got a home at a streamer. They're all about finding that niche that's being underserved.
I always think about movies like And Justice for All. That was a studio movie, and today no studio would ever make that. But you could see somebody like Amazon making that movie.
Or The Verdict.
Or The Verdict, yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like if you have a straight up adult drama, most likely it's gonna live at a streamer, because for a studio it costs the same amount to market a straight up adult drama. There's a leaf blower right outside my door. Let's see. Can you guys hear that? Yeah. 1 second. All right.
This show is brought to you
by Black & Decker. Yeah.
By Black & Decker.
All right. Is that still? Can you hear that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. If you've got a movie that's a straight up adult drama, that's a movie that costs the same to market for a studio as it does one of their bigger movies, and is going to have a much lower return on investment for them because it has such a niche audience. So for them, they're like, okay, why gamble with that when we could be spending our money on something that's going to sell a shitload of tickets to high schoolers in China. Places like Netflix, Amazon, Hulu are meeting that need that's not getting met elsewhere. And
thankful for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's so fascinating, watching the state of movies versus the state of streaming and television, because for a while movies were absolutely where it's at. Like it was like if you worked in TV, it meant that something had gone wrong in your movie career, or that you just didn't make it into there.
That's right.
And it my graduating class was kind of like the last gasp of that. Like I graduated in 2007, so there was prestige TV was just starting to come up. You had The Shield, The Wire, The Sopranos had been on the air, Lost was on the air. It was just before Mad Men and Breaking Bad, and what was going on was, because all the movie studios had been bought by these huge conglomerate parent companies, they were using budgets that used to be for buying original material, and instead spending that money on buying up IP, buying up games, toys, comics, things like that. And so anybody that wanted to tell original, groundbreaking stories left movies and went into television, and specifically now into streaming. So that's why when you look at what's coming out in theaters, it's sequels and remakes and reboots and stuff that people have bought before, because for the conglomerates, they're like, all right, the only sure bet that we have is what people have already spent money on. Whereas in television, you can have this renaissance that we've had going for the past like decade or so, with just as a result of the brain drain that came out of features.
Your scripts have a lot of action set pieces.
I noticed
Infinite starts. I mean, you cut to the chase immediately. In Infinite, it just it opens there. 1031 has some terrific tense moments. What are some of the do's and don'ts when you come to writing action set pieces, and what do you think constitutes a good action set piece?
I like this one. This is a fun question.
Sure.
So I guess in terms of do's and don'ts, for me, the biggest do is treat your eye like the camera while you're writing it. For me, like when I'm writing an action set piece, I am imagining every beat of it as it's happening, and I sort of view them almost like domino effects or like chain reactions. Like the goal is to keep throwing obstacles and reversals and challenges at your main character as they're attempting to get through some physical space to achieve a goal. Like it's essentially it's just all the drama you would have in a 3-act narrative done over the course of a 5-page scene, and most of it physical with extremely high stakes. I found that okay, Lawn Below guy is back. Okay, great. We're going to sell so many of these things with our new sponsor here.
Exactly.
Why don't you bring him in? Why don't you bring him into the interview?
That's the first thing is treating each action set piece like it's its own little mini movie, its own little mini story. It's got its own beginning, middle, and end. It's got an objective and obstacles and reversals that get in the way of your character. The other approach that I take is I think a lot about location when I'm writing action, and I think about what objects exist within that location, because we've all seen a million fist fights, we've all seen a million gunfights, we've all seen a million car chases. So the way that you can do the thing that we've never seen before is to get hyper specific about your location and about what exists within that. Like for example, Infinite starts off with a car chase that turns into a sword fight. And so for that one, I realized I had never seen a sword fight happening on top of a construction crane. And so I had the character essentially jump out of a moving car on top of a freeway overpass to land on a construction crane, then fight a dude with a sword. Or like same script, there was a car chase sequence I was writing where the main character has been stolen from a jail cell by the other good guys and getting chased by the bad guy. And I was like, okay, where have I never seen a car chase? And I started thinking about that great moment in the first Terminator when he crashes the cop car into the police station.
Right.
I was like, all right, well, I'm already writing an insane big budget movie anyway, so let's just push this as far as we can go. What if the car chase happens through the police station? What if we just completely destroy the entire precinct and have cops diving out of the way, and the cars going down between the rows of cells and ripping bars out of the floor, busting through walls, jumping out windows. And once I realized that the chase wasn't going to take place on the street, then the rest of it started writing itself. So I always try to make it really clear where the action's happening, what the goal for the character is, what's standing in their way. And I guess I'm just always looking for the thing that is different from what we've seen before.
How did you get? You've written for television too. You've written. How did that happen? And were you part of the writers' rooms for these shows for Deputy and was the Training Day? Yes.
Yeah. So both those shows were created by one of my favorite writers, a guy named Will Bell, who he wrote Aquaman, he wrote Gangster Squad, and Will's got a pretty fascinating story. He was an LAPD detective down in the 77th precinct for most of his career, and was writing sort of a thinly veiled memoir about his experiences on the force that became the book, then the script LA Rex, that the year that it came out, I think that was like #1 on the Blacklist. So he was writing just in his spare time, and eventually, started having so much success on the writing front that he stopped being a cop and just became a full-time writer. So he and I crossed paths through my manager. Like they had known each other back when Will was first working on the staff of that TV show Castle. Basically, anytime I would read a Will Bell script, I would be like, oh God, I need to up my game. This guy is embarrassing me. Like I'd never seen that much just raw, powerful, natural talent in one place. I was like, this guy's only written one script in his entire life. I fucking hate him. I have to meet him. So he and I became buddies, and when he sold his pitch for the TV, like a TV version of Training Day, to CBS. They went to series on it. And he staffed up his writer's room and offered me a position on that. And I was 34 at the time and had never worked in TV before, so it was a brand new world for me. It was like being back at the first day of kindergarten again. Honestly, like. When you're a features guy, you spend a lot of time at home alone working on your own stuff, and you start to develop habits that you realize you can't really have when you're working in a room full of people. Like I realized that first day when I was working with all the other writers in the room that apparently when I get up from the table and stretch, I make these sort of like roaring sounds. So all these things that you pick up when you're just working by yourself, you have to untrain yourself when you're now part of a room full of people. So yeah, we had an awesome experience writing Training Day for him, and then unfortunately our star Bill Paxton died, right, and the show got canceled. But a couple years later, when Will sold his show Deputy to Fox, he brought me back for the writer's room on that. I think the big thing I've discovered for writing TV versus writing features is when you're writing features, it's kind of like surfing. You paddle out on your own power. It's very fast paced. You get to, have these little thrilling bursts of speed, and at the end of the day, you pack it in yourself. But the process of being on like the staff of a TV show, it's not like surfing. It's more like being on like the staff of a ship, where like before you even leave the harbor, you have to tie down all these different ropes and swab the deck and do a million other things. So it's extremely slow paced, at least compared to writing features, but you can't get across the whole ocean on a surfboard. You can only do that on a ship that size. And by that, I mean, you can't crank out, 22 episodes of content over the course of a season by yourself. Like you need to be part of a crew for that. So like it's if you are okay with working with 10 other voices on all on the same story, and you are okay with serving the vision of whoever the showrunner is, then yeah, then working in TV is the better way for you.
So it's just a coincidence that Antoine Fuqua directed the feature version of Training Day, and he's directing.
Yeah, actually, Antoine and I never crossed paths on Training Day. He actually wasn't super involved in the show. Like, there was a hot second when they were considering doing it at Netflix, and he was very interested in that. But ultimately, CBS won out, and he was less interested in that. So Antoine didn't direct the pilot. He didn't really have a lot of input on the show. He and I never met. I mean, he's tight with Will. It was just kind of a total happy coincidence that he wound up being the guy that responded to Infinite.
Yeah, a very happy coincidence. It's good for you. Ramesh, go ahead. I see you just chomping at the bit.
Oh, no, I'm just going through the questions.
Your mouth moving, you know, like your mouth moving. And
no, I wanted to ask about the stuff you're working on now. Juliet and Ark Survival is based on a video game, right?
Yeah.
And how do you approach writing that, taking a video game and turning it into a feature film?
Oh, with video games, they really naturally lend themselves to features because they're so visual, they're so full of conflict and action and world building that it's a pretty easy fit to see how certain games would become features, but they're also extremely hard to do well. There haven't been that many good video game adaptations. So for something like Ark Survival, the biggest part of my job with that was to figure out how to tell the most simple, streamlined version of the story of the game. Because, like, I don't know if you played this game, but this game is absolutely insane. It's like the creators came up with like 30 different awesome ideas for games and then did them all as one game. Like, it involves like space stations, dinosaurs, superpowers, robots, monsters. It is a total smorgasbord of a game. It's a massive world, and so for the adaptation of that, my way into it was just to find whatever the one element that was most appealing to me, and that I think would be most appealing to the audience, like the element that would wind up in the poster or on the trailer, and then center the story around that. So this is a world where different tribes of people with essentially domesticated, weaponized dinosaurs live in this sort of ecosystem battling for resources. So when I went in and pitched the studio, my take on it, I said, okay, you've got this massive sandbox to play in. You have this tremendous world. You have some pretty complicated world building. So the best version of this is going to be to tell an extremely simple story within this very big, vivid, complex world. So I pitched them essentially Mad Max Fury Road, but with weaponized dinosaurs instead of cars. Like a movie where the second act is one long chase sequence. I was comparing it to like Apocalypto or any of those other very stripped down, minimalistic chase thrillers that just happen to take place in this maximalistic world. And just by taking something that in game form is something that you have hours, days, weeks, months to get to know and understand, versus a movie where you have 2 hours to make the audience understand it. I just wanted to give them the most streamlined, emotional version of that story possible.
Okay.
There's a great lesson in that, because I often will read sci-fi from new writers, and it's always a very, very big idea in an even bigger world. And of course, the script meanders. It makes no sense. But finding a stripped down version, going with a small concept inside of a bigger world or bigger story, lots of complications, makes a much better screenplay, in my opinion. So it's great to hear you talk about that.
Oh yeah, you're totally hitting the nail on the head. Like if you look at the first Terminator, all that movie is a chase thriller. It's a woman on the run with this dude she's just met from this unstoppable bad guy. I mean that plot could be a lot of different movies, but because that very simple emotional story is happening in the context of this crazy universe with cyborgs and time travel and the end of the world and like all kinds of thematic wild shit about fate and destiny and what we're able to make of those, it felt like a gigantic movie that was actually deceptively small and simple. And I think that, like, finding the simple emotional story to tell inside a larger world like that is a big key to creating good sci-fi.
Yeah, especially movie sci-fi. I always joke, it's like you look at RoboCop, it's about a RoboCop, or Planet of the Apes, it's about a planet of apes.
Yeah, it does exactly what it says in the package.
Right. You can't get those concepts any cleaner. And then you can complicate and grow that out. But this is why so many new writers have a hard time pitching or even coming up with a log line, because the idea that they start with is so big and so convoluted.
Yeah. Like if you had to give me the job of writing the log line for the first Star Wars, that would be an intense piece of work, because where do you start with that? And because Lucas was smart enough to focus on this, sort of farm boy everyman going on this journey against this gigantic villainous force, he was able to find the simple story within the larger, more complicated one.
Right.
Your scripts have Infinite and all the others. There's a lot of world building in your stories. How do you make sure that the world building, the worlds you're creating, don't sort of engulf character and story when you're setting out to do these?
And can you just first define world building for people who may not be familiar with it?
Oh yeah, sure. So world building, it typically refers to when you're creating a sci-fi script or a period piece or any world that is not immediately recognizably our own. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to build, like, some other planet like in Dune or something, or it could be a specific time period, like Back to the Future had the world of Hill Valley in the 1950s that was its own form of world building. The spaceship in the first Alien was creating that environment was its own form of world building. It's you laying out the parameters of the reality that your story takes place in a way that the audience can believe in that world. And it's an easy trap to fall into, because anytime that you're spending page space world building, it usually means you're not telling your story or developing your characters. Like I was talking about Mad Max Fury Road a second ago, and that's maybe the finest example of cinematic world building I can imagine. And that movie didn't even have a script in a traditional sense. It just had a series of storyboards. Right. And if it did have a script, it would have been 300 pages long and mostly descriptions of what people are wearing. So when I think about what makes good world building, I think about what details are going to make something that is not real feel real, or is it something that even if it's something that was real, like a period of time in the past, your whole goal with the world building is to make the reader feel like they're there. So the way that I approach that is I look for mundane, everyday, human level details that I can throw in there that will make whatever fantastical world we're in feel lived in and believable. So like okay, for example, in the first Alien, you've got a world where there is interstellar space travel, there's mining happening on other planets, there's there's hypersleep chambers so people can go these insane distances, and you have a villain that is a gigantic monster with acid for blood that is constantly growing and changing after bursting out of somebody's chest. So you've got a super fantastical sci-fi world in that movie, but the way that they make the world feel believable is they make all the characters these kind of blue collar trucker types who bitch about the bad food and the lousy pay and the fact that they're not getting a bonus. Like these guys who have rivalries with each other, who have friendships, who have flirtations, who have bad blood, who smoke cigarettes and have specific little pieces of accoutrement that they wear on their outfits that reflect their personalities, who crack jokes. So like a lot of world building could come out of character. The other thing that you notice if you watch Alien are like the fact that the ship is covered in these sort of soft white pads on the interior, kind of like the cabin of an automobile. It'll take recognizable things from our life, from our world, and put them into its own world as a way of grounding it. So I'm always looking for ways to take whatever is fantastical about the world that I'm creating and ground it in things that we recognize.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so I have one last question before we wrap it up. And you spoke earlier about that it's obviously much more difficult to sell a spec script today. And how can a new writer expect to enter the business? What are potential routes for them?
That's
a tough question to ask. Yeah.
Oh, the good news is that there are more than there used to be. There are more ways to get eyeballs onto your script. Like there's this great Warren Buffett quote where he said the key to success is doing good work in a public space, and the public space for screenwriters has been expanded over the past few years. So in terms of like strategies for how to break in, going after, like being specific about which contests you want to focus your attention on, the ones that actually mean something. It could be getting a membership to the Blacklist and uploading your scripts onto there and continually refining them until they start to get scores that get people's attention. Like I know my manager signed multiple clients off of the Blacklist website who prior to this were completely unknown. I think that given the fact that everybody has a camera in their pocket now, shooting your own content and editing it yourself on your laptop, just making your own shorts is that's never been easier. Of course, there's also never been more content out there that you have to compete with, but that just gives you an extra impetus to be really good at it. Even something like writing a short story that you put up on Medium. I think a big short story called Stage 13 just sold this past week. Or that there was that project on Reddit where the guy was posting, that horror story onto No Sleep, and that's not the first script I've heard about getting a deal that began on Reddit. So between Reddit, YouTube, Medium, there's all these new ways that you can get content out into the world, and if it's really fucking good, then somebody's going to notice. Those are all good opportunities right there. The other thing that worked for me is just to keep cranking out specs and keep continually polishing them and showing them to people whose notes you trust, people who you think are creatively smart and going to help make your project better. Getting your spec into a place where it feels like it is the best representation of the work that you can do. Because if you've got something that is that good, then any of your friends that know anybody in the industry are going to become a hero if they take your script out and get some heat on it. Like, I never took a day working as an assistant or as an intern. Like, I didn't go that route. I had plenty of friends that did. And when I was first breaking in, when I had my good calling card script, I could have called any of those guys and said, like, hey, okay, I think this is the one. Will you read this? And if they found it to be good, then they show it to the boss and they become like the hero for that day because they found an awesome piece of material from an unknown writer. I guess the big headline here is whether or not you do it by going the spec route or the networking through internship or trying to be an assistant or putting out material on YouTube, Medium, Reddit, whatever. The big headline is the only people that make it in this business are the ones that bet on themselves. So no matter what route you take, just remember that what you got to be doing is betting on you.
Okay. I have one more question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Ramesh.
Yeah. Speaking, because you brought up new writers, are there any mistakes that you see that new writers make either in their writing or in their approach to screenwriting?
I would say that one of the more common mistakes that I see is there's a focus on outcome rather than process, a focus on result rather than process. You've got you have a lot of up-and-coming writers who it almost seems like they don't actually want to be writers. They want to have written. They want to have sold a script. They want to have been validated. They want to to get their rep. They want to get paid. Where the focus is all on the carrot and not on the stick. So the trap of that is it takes your eyes off the only thing that matters, which is the quality of your work. Like the only two things that you have control over in this industry are the quality and the quantity of your writing. So like if I had figured out early on that like my real only goal should be just to focus on the quality of the writing, I might have had an easier time at the beginning, or I would have tortured myself less about where I was career wise. If you are able to get yourself to a point where you actually take pleasure in rewriting, where you take pleasure in refining and polishing your work, that's a pretty good sign that this is what you were meant to do.
Thank you.
How many spec scripts do you think a new writer should write a year?
I think it depends on the writer. I think that if you are brand new to the game, like, and if you're writing your first spec this year, I've seen exactly one time in my entire career where somebody's first script was so good that it was the beginning of their career, and that was Will Bell with LA Rex. Never seen that happen with anybody else. Like, my first script was god awful. Basically, everybody else I know, their script was god awful too, and sometimes it takes writing 3 before you write a good one. Sometimes it takes 5. Sometimes it takes 12. Everybody's path is different, but I think if you can make yourself write, say, 1 or 2 a year, that means you are putting yourself to a professional work ethic. Like if you if you get an assignment, you have about 3 months to write that script. So if you are, or if it's a bigger job, then sometimes it's 6 months. So if you can make yourself adhere to that professional schedule even before you're getting paid, that just is going to help you in the long run. But in terms of a concrete number of what to write before you're ready, the only way to know is when you show a script to somebody and they not only read the whole thing in one sitting, that they are excited to show it to other people. Like the same way that a piece of YouTube content can go viral, scripts can go viral as well. And that desire from other people to show your work around is the sign that your work is ready.
And that's also how you get on that blacklist, because your script has gone viral, so to speak. I do meet a lot of new writers who are peddling the same script a decade later. They
God, no. That way lies madness. Like, if you have a script that that's one of your early ones, and you finished it, you maybe showed it around, you did some rewrites on it, you took it out, you couldn't get any traction with it, do yourself the favor of moving on to the next thing. Like, even for me right now, the only way that I keep myself sane is by constantly thinking about what the next piece of business is. The quickest way to become like a bitter, frustrated writer is to keep your claws dug into that same script that's been sitting in your desk for a decade. Like, if you find yourself having to push the boulder up the hill, like if other people aren't as excited about the script as you are, it usually means that there's an issue with the script, and maybe you can fix it, maybe you can't. Most likely the truth is you got to move on to the next thing. You've got to take what you learned from that first one and apply it to the next one.
Good. Well, Ian, our time has come to an end, and we really appreciate your chiming in today, hearing about your experience. We're certainly looking forward to seeing Infinite in 2021.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Memorial Day weekend. I will see you guys there, and thank you so much for having me.
Maybe we'll get you back on again around the time of the premiere. That might be fun.
Yeah,
huh?
That would be super fun. I would love that. Yeah.
Right.
That's
right.
if movie theaters are open in 2021. And
oh, you know something? Wow. I'm literally living in a fantasy world. I totally forgot. God, you brought me down.
It'll soon be science fiction when we have movie theaters open. What is this place?
Maybe we'll have a lot to talk about. So, again, Ian, thank you so much for your time today.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks so much, Ian. Bye-bye.